Introduction to Early Asian Immigration to California. Examining early Asian immigration to California requires us to broaden our discussion on the common experiences of all immigrants to the United States. In terms of immigration to the United States, we must always consider the push and pull factors of immigration. Push factors are the conditions in the home country that push their populations to emigrate or leave their country, such as poverty, war, and political corruption, religious persecution, unemployment, lack of civil rights, etc. Pull factors are the conditions of the host country that encourage migrants to that country or a specific area, such as opportunity, employment, better living conditions, political asylum. For those coming to the United States, you may often hear the American dream, freedom and equality, etc. Now, there are some important specifics for each immigrating group, but since the beginning of this country, these same general push and pull factors have relatively remained constant. To better understand the experience of immigrants to California and the United States, we must examine the cycle of racial conflict. This is a framework that can be applied to most immigrant groups and their historical experiences in the United States and California. The cycle of racial conflict connects the immigrant experience with capitalism, the U.S. economic system. There are a lot of features to capitalism, but for our discussion, we will focus on profit. Capitalism is a profit motive system. The driving engine or main objective is to increase your profit. Simple economic logic tells us that in order to increase your profit, one must decrease their expenses or keep the cost reduction low. Thus, the capitalists, in this case, landowners, factory owners, railroad companies, and other industries, are always in search for quote-unquote cheap labor. For many employers, cheap labor is synonymous with immigrant labor. Capitalists could pay lower wages, force immigrants to work longer hours, they don't have for them benefits, or allow them to form unions. This is what we call economic exploitation. Thus, it is in the interest of the capitalists to maintain a continuous source of immigrant labor. As we continue with this cycle, U.S. capitalists will collaborate with institutions in foreign countries and with their governments to lure and recruit immigrants. With this understanding, we can argue that most immigrants don't come entirely on their own accord, but the migration of groups of people from one country to another, in this case immigration to the United States, is systematic and organized. That specific population of immigrants will then increase dramatically in a specific period of time and usually in a very concentrated area. This increase in a particular immigrant's population creates strong anti-immigrant sentiments. While this sentiment is felt by different groups of people, it is the white working class that has historically been the most vocal and is usually expressed through rhetoric such as, "California is for whites only, those immigrants are taking our jobs, they're stealing our women, They cannot be assimilated. They can never become American, etc. These sentiments will manifest laws and legislation that will then exclude and marginalize this particular group. With the exclusion and marginalization of that particular immigrant group becoming law, this racist practice becomes institutionalized. So, for example, immigrants will not be able to go to public schools. They will live or forced to be lived in segregated neighborhoods. Politically, they may not be able to become civilized citizens and will not be able to vote, etc. Thus, non-white immigrants will be allowed in the U.S. for economic reasons, but will be excluded socially and politically. Non-white immigrants will be allowed to enter as cheap migratory laborers and members of a racially subordinated group, not future citizens of American society. Take note that this is a cycle. When one group is excluded entirely, the capitalists will then be forced to import another group of immigrants to fill that labor void. So, for example, with the anti-Chinese sentiment so strong in the early 1900s of California, the Chinese Exclusion Act will be passed that will bar any more Chinese laborers from entering the United States. Capitalists then began to import Japanese immigrants to fulfill their labor void. This Japanese population will increase, anti-Japanese sentiment will manifest, and anti-Japanese laws will prohibit entry into the country. Thus, the cycle will continue. The capitalists will then, no longer being able to import laborers from China or Japan, will look to other countries such as Korea and the Philippines. Once there are continuous anti-Asian sentiments that include Korean and Filipino immigrants, they too will be barred from entering the country, and these capitalists will begin their search again for cheap immigrant labor from Mexico and Central America, and thus the cycle